Hi everybody, welcome to A plus Calculus, and in this video we're gonna do some practice problems on graphing a complex number in the complex plane. Now in the previous video I took some problems in which the complex number was already plotted on the complex plane and we had to write its name. And in this video we're gonna do the opposite, that is, the name of the complex number is given, but we're going to plot it on the complex plane. Now if you haven't watched the previous video, then you can watch it by clicking on the I button above, and also I'll paste its link in the description box. Also, if you want to get some context to complex plane, like what is complex plane and how do we plot complex numbers and how do we represent a complex number in the form of a two-dimensional point, so you can watch the first video where I'm introducing the complex plane, the link of which I'll paste in the description box. Alright, so let's get started. So the first problem is graph the number 7i in the complex plane. Now if you guys can recall, here this is a complex plane because if you see, you have real axis and the imaginary axis. Okay, so on the real axis you can see real numbers, right? 0 1 2 3 4 5 6, and on the imaginary axis you can see imaginary numbers, so 2i 4i 6i and so on. Now we want to plot 7i on this complex plane. So first of all I'm going to write this complex number in the form a plus bi. So in a plus bi, a is the real part of the complex number and b is the imaginary part of the complex number. If you know the values of a and b, then you just have to plot it in the form of a comma b, where your a will go on the real axis and b will go on the imaginary axis. So if you compare 7i, if we compare 7i with a plus bi, we can see that here real part does not exist. Real part is 0 over here, so I can write it as 0 plus 7i, right? 0 plus 7i. So that means that the value of a is 0 here and value of b is 7. That means I have this point 0 comma 7. Now I just have to plot this point 0 comma 7. That means on the real axis, let's just assume that you're standing at the origin, and then on the real axis part you have to move for 0 distance. That means you don't move at all in the horizontal direction. Then for the imaginary axis, your value of b is 7. That means you have to move 7 units on the imaginary axis. Okay, so when you move 7 units up, since it's positive 7, you're going to reach to this point, and this point is your complex number 7i. Okay, let's do one more problem. Graph the number 2 in the complex plane. Again, we are going to compare 2 with the we're going to write 2 in the form of a plus bi. Now in this case, we only have the real part and we don't have the imaginary part, so I can write it as 2 plus 0 times I. Now upon comparing, I get that value of a here is 2 and value of b here is 0. That means on the real axis I have to move 2 units in the right direction, so that means over here, and on the imaginary axis I don't have to move we don't have to move, we just stand there. So since b is equal to 0, so that means this is the complex number 2. Okay, next problem, -3 minus I. -3 minus I, this is a very straightforward one. If we compare it with the standard form of a complex number, so we get value of a is -3 and value of b is -1. That means our point is -3 comma -1. That means on the real axis I'll move 3 units in the left direction, so -2 and -3, and on the imaginary axis I have to move 1 unit in the downward direction. So that is gonna be this point. Let me remove this dot. Yeah, so this point is -3 minus I.